let's talk about the matrix and reality, and the reality of layers. As scientific and easy to understand as possible. Hopefully that works. All right, let's break it down. The default consensus reality is everything you see around you. It is the most dominant system that people live in. When you talk to everybody every day, all day, work stuff, everything else, they are all living in the default consensus reality. The quantum observer reality is your system. It is a projection of your consciousness. It is a projection of you and everything that's going on with you and your body in your central nervous system. It operates, it's projected, and it bends time and space from you and your body and your choices and your reality. That is the authored state. Now, in the default consensus reality, everybody is contributing to that. Systems are reinforced. What systems are reinforced? The system of cause and effect. What you see is the only thing that's real. When you have an action, there's an automatic reaction. So everything is placed in the now. Combining these layers can be confusing. So you want to see the consensus layered reality as the entire world you live in and what people default to and what most people live in, because they haven't understood how everything comes together. And that's okay. There's no judgment. I'm just saying that that's what most people live in. Cause and effect, that's their reality. If I go to work, I do this, then I make that. So that is the default consensus reality. Now the quantum observer reality is your authored state. That is when you realize that you are the one creating everything, and that everything is coming from you, and everything is coming from your perception of life and your consciousness. And your perception is guided by your central nervous system and your history and epigenetics. So that is you in your quantum reality authored state. Now, the premise of this is that it's a projection, that everything is projected through your eyes, right? And it's rooted in quantum physics and the wave function. And the wave function in quantum physics says that everything doesn't have form or shape, and it just moves in a wave until you observe it, and then it collapses and becomes something. In this authored state, synchronicity replaces cause and effect, meaning that things just happen and it's almost as if it's magic. For example, I remodeled my house. I didn't remodel it, but I flipped it. I bought a foreclosure and I flipped it. And in my mind, I had this vision. I knew it was going to sell. That is the authored state. I was creating a reality in my mind. I saw the way that I wanted to decorate the house. I saw what I wanted to put in, flooring, marble. I watched Chip and Joanna Gaines, and I modeled the house after that because it was big at the time. I did all this research about decoration, everything, and all the research helped my belief in what I was doing. Now, that house sold in less than 24 hours, sight unseen, by a couple out of state. Out of state, sight unseen. Who buys a house sight unseen from another state? And it wasn't like it was like an expensive house, where somebody's just doing a walkthrough and this is New York. No, this was in BFE, Texas. And they bought it out of state from Iowa. That is huge. That is an example of your authored state and synchronicity. In the authored state, we're still in the authored state, time is nonlinear. That's science. Healing is your system. And you, when you are healing that system, you heal the world around you. Meaning that if you don't like what's happening around you, you got to change this. And it doesn't mean, bypassing or being positive. It means getting to the point where you feel peace because you are confident in the outcome. Not that you know the outcome, but that you are confident in the outcome that is best, that your higher self, your authored state has, that is best. If I go back to the example of the house being sold to the couple from Iowa, I knew the house would sell, but what I didn't know was when it would sell and who it would sell to. But my authored state and the synchronicity was the 24 hours and the couple buying the house from out of state without even seeing it. That is the synchronicity. That is the magic. Let's move on now to the mythic and esoteric layers. Now, the mythic and the esoteric layers involved religion, astral planes, the occult frameworks like witchcraft and all those things, and spiritual systems. They often present as layers, but still operate with duality, meaning good versus evil, soul versus body, higher self versus lower self. And in this reality layer, healing uses those tools. Change requires rituals, permissions, and an intermediary to focus. Meaning that in the mythic and esoteric layers, the power is outside of the authored state. The power is given to religion. The power is given to the mythic. The power is given to the occult instead of the author, which is you. And that's fine. If you want to operate with something that is an intermediary, it's a tool. And humans have made those tools in order to live, in order to be able to process the life and the problems they've had and enable to move forward. This is their explanation of it. But when it comes down to it, everything comes from the author. So the default consensus reality that everybody's in is still being authored by themselves. The only difference between that and all the other layers is the things in the middle. Who are you giving your power to? Or are you empowering yourself? And there's nothing wrong with anything that you choose or any reality. It simply is what it is. Now, a lot of people may get upset with that, but there's nothing I can do about it because science is the language of this timeline. And science says the observer effect is real. So, in that sense, everything is created from the author's state. Does that make sense? So how does this help you? What do you do with this information? Well, you have to start looking at things that everything comes from within. Everything comes from within. Everything is you in your authored state, because no matter which consensus reality you're in or what reality layer you're operating in, it's all layered, right? You got your default consensus, and then you've got your authored state in here. Your authored state is you in the middle, creating everything. So the way to affect it, the way to start using your authored state is to recognize it, that you are in it, that you create everything, that you are doing everything, and then start to take action towards the things that you actually want and believe that they are going to happen. And if you are really spiritual, then you've probably come from a hard background. If you have anxiety, it's going to keep you in a challenged operated state, author state. So the flex is once you understand the layers of reality, that you start to work with your authored state to create the one that you want instead of living in the default. And the way that you do that is start doing the deep work and taking action. Because if you can't take action on the things that you actually want, you're in a default state. If you are too scared, you're living in the default state. Fear is part of the default state. Fear comes from something that happened to you. And you have to figure out what happened to you to conquer that fear and move into the authored state. Because like attracts like in this whole matrix. Like attracts like. So fear attracts more fear. And it doesn't just attract fear as an abstract. It attracts things for you to be fearful of. Okay? So you're not just attracting the emotion. You are attracting situations And then if your nervous system is already dysregulated because you're attracting those things that happen to you, you're going to start operating from a trigger head. Meaning, you're not going to be able to make a coherent choice that guides you to where you want to go if you're operating off of fear in the default state. So what you have to do is find out why you're afraid, sit with it, and then when you take action, when you start feeling the brain fog and the fear and the nervous system stuff, you have to sit with it, breathe through it, and still take action. Because what you are doing when you do that is telling your brain and your body, which are the drivers in this reality, that you are in charge and that everything's okay and that you are strong enough and willing to process what's happening in your body and take action towards what you actually want. That means that you are going to be confronted with things that trigger you. You are going to be confronted with the like attracts like, right? With situations. As you're healing your central nervous system, you're still going to be in the default consensus reality. You're going to be like teetering on the bridge of default and authored state. And what you have to do is when you're triggered and when things come up, you have to make a different choice. And you have to wait and you have to calm down so that you can see the choices ahead of you. And when you do that, when you calm and when you choose from a different state, you are changing from the default consensus reality to your authored state. Do you know why? Because you're not reacting. Because reaction is the default consensus. You are waiting, taking account of everything that's going on, telling yourself, which is reparenting yourself and reauthorizing yourself, that everything is okay in this moment. And you breathe and you tell yourself you can handle it. And when you can do that, you are creating neural pathways in your brain. And you are connecting your brain to your body. And then, once you calm down and you make a choice, and everything happens okay, you realize that you can do this. And the more you do it, it's just like anything else. You get used to it, and you become an expert at it until it no longer bothers you. And that is when the synchronicities start to happen all the time. That is when your life changes. That's when the joy comes in. That's when the happiness comes in. And it is all because you're doing the connecting of your mind, body, and spirit and becoming an author in your own life story. This was my first video in a long time about this stuff. It's my favorite thing to talk about. So thanks for being here. Love you, mean it. Bye.